I guess we're calling these survivor games now, and if that's the case, I think Soulstone Survivor is one of the better ones. I'm on the other side of about 20 or so hours with the early access build on Steam, and I've been having a fantastic time. It proposes some really interesting changes to some of the genre's tenets. Not all of them are a success, but enough of them are to ensure that Soulstone Survivors is not only a quality title, but one that's different enough from its competitors to warrant a seat at the table. By the way, that 20 hours I spent, I did that in one weekend. So yes, this is another developer taking a stab at the Vampire Survivors formula. It's a roguelike with a continuous horde of bad guys that surround you. Kill them to level up so that you can keep killing them while simultaneously making key decisions on your build by finding synergies among the options that are presented to you. Finish a 15-minute run, then go do it again with a different character, different map, or different strategy, all the while earning more progress towards a meta progression layer that keeps unlocking more difficulty modifiers and characters and so on. But for as much as it derives, it also introduces. What really defines Soulstone Survivors is a few gameplay choices that make it feel far different from Vampire Survivors while playing, even if it shares so much. I think Soulstone's standout feature is how it handles mid-run builds and progression. You level up frequently, every few seconds in most cases, and each time you level up you'll be presented with one of 3 power-ups. These power-ups broadly fall into one of 2 categories, active or passive. Active is kind of a misnomer because these fire off automatically, but these are your moves. Picking one will have it auto-shoot every few seconds as you walk around in whatever direction and frequency is dictated by its attributes. You're going to have up to 6 of these in your run, but one of them will be your character's starting active. Passives are modifiers for your actives, giving them more damage, higher frequency, larger areas, etc. But what makes them different from just items under another name is their modularity. There's no particular combos you need to strive for to fulfill particular recipes. Instead, each active has a set of 4 to 5 traits that may have to do with its element, or its firing arc, or whether or not it impacts an area, and other such tags. This means that a pretty decent strategy when in doubt is to seek out actives that share multiple attributes, then look for passives that buff those attributes. An obvious example would be running a build that's entirely fire actives, so if you get fire buffing passives, you'll get multiplicative benefits because your setup is 6 fire spells. But less obvious examples would be something like running a fire, ice, and shadow build. Sure, those are all seemingly unrelated traits, but they're all elementally themed, and that could be the through line that you enhance. Maybe you're running a build that has a weird combination of physical swings and magical attacks, but perhaps they all fire off in an area around you. Whatever random traits you end up getting, odds are you'll be able to find and exploit some shared attribute among them and build a superpowered character to carry you for the run, and it feels excellent. That's not to say that all of these decisions are finely balanced just yet. There are definitely traits that are far too powerful to not always pick right now when you get to the higher difficulty modifiers, but that's a numbers problem. The systems at play in the Foundation are strong, and house hours upon hours of unique runs. There's also a ton of variance introduced by which character you pick, as different characters have varying starting stats, slightly different attribute pools, and a handful of traits unique to them as well. Play with the meta rune system and you can push that farther by tweaking the traits that are allowed to show up, and once you've progressed far enough you'll unlock bans and rerolls to give you more autonomy over your run. There's a lot to the build and tag system, and the amount of micro choices you'll be able to make each run is staggering. It fulfills a progression fantasy and pushes it to 11, with the late game of your strongest builds being able to fill the screen with your own multiplied spell effects and kill dozens of foes at a time. And that brings me to what's probably the biggest surface level uniqueness of Soulstone Survivors, its high level of activity. So the premise of this genre is usually one of decision making and strategy, where the only task required of your fingers is to position yourself. Soulstone challenges that in a few different ways. For starters, every character has a dash move on a super low cooldown that can be used to zip around enemies. There's also a targeting reticle you control with your mouse that will aim most, if not all, projectiles, requiring a bit more skill when it comes to ensuring your damage hits your opponent's health bars. But I think the largest way in which the game's micro demands can be felt isn't by anything you're doing, but by what your opponents are doing. In Vampire Survivors, your most common deaths are your build's inability to overcome the aggregate strength of the opposing horde. In Soulstone Survivors, your most common deaths are because you walked into an individually high damage enemy move. Most enemies fire projectiles or slam the ground in some way, manifesting as these filling red circles that you need to avoid. In the higher difficulty modifiers, getting hit by one of these can spell your doom pretty quickly. If you're someone who thought that Vampire Survivors might have been too passive, then rejoice. But at the same time, I think Soulstone is a playable explanation as to why Vampire is the way that it is. Because when developers create a game in this genre, they're making a promise to you that the screen is going to be filled with enemies. That's the feature, not the bug. Hell, you're going to be filling the screen too, seeing as how 2 of your stats are infinitely scaling spell effect width and multicast bonuses that will have your monitor light up in this phantasmagoria. Take a look at the Steam community for this game, and at least half of the posts are going to be people making memes about how blinded you're going to be when this stuff is going on. And I actually enjoy that. In fact, I think multicast should become a de facto RPG stat in games. It's hilarious. But this style of screen filling, high noise, floor is lava style dodging doesn't gel well with the laser light show that is the presentation. Most of the time my deaths felt like I had a build that could go the distance, but I died unexpectedly because I got stuck on a small piece of geometry in the sea of things going on. This is not a game that ebbs and flows, it's all flow. The enemies are a fire hose of threats, and you need to keep that in mind. You can't get away with playing this one with one hand. But that actually leads into one of the game's other strengths. Its directness over your control makes it feel really good to play. When you scale up your build to being an Avengers level threat, you really feel it. Hours will melt in front of you as you amass higher body counts. Even if not all of your deaths feel fair, there's a tremendous amount of character building and carnage to be had. Soulstone Survivors is a great game, and I absolutely think it's worth a buy. But I think the better question is not if, but when it should be purchased. I think that depends on your tolerance for where the game is currently lacking, and that's in its out-of-combat progression systems. These are just transparently unfinished, and you can tell even without looking at the roadmap. You'll run out of skills on the skill tree to purchase and items to craft at the blacksmith by around the 15-hour mark, leaving nearly all of your accumulated currencies sitting uselessly on the home screen to be perpetually unexchanged. If those out-of-combat progression layers are a big incentive for you to play these kinds of games or roguelikes in general, then I'd say Soulstone is more of a wish list than a purchase right now. But if you don't mind those being bare bones as long as the core is strong, then you can still definitely get your $10 worth. The flexible character building system and satisfying combat make Soulstone Survivors a worthy entry into this tiny but growing subgenre. Its emphasis on more minute control over your avatar doesn't always mesh well with the endless stream of enemies and attacks competing for your attention, but what it lacks in elegance it makes up for in being massively compelling.